This is the recap for Chapter 22, the lymphatic system and immunity. Now, some of you might be saying to yourselves, I really don't even know what the lymphatic system is. So let's start at the beginning. The lymphatic system is what we use to defend our body, and its main job and how it does defend our body is to produce and maintain and distribute lymphocytes, which are the cells of your lymphatic system. So, what that means is in our lymphatic system, we have things called lymph vessels. Lymph vessels are really similar to blood vessels. They're going to help distribute fluid throughout our body. So, if you look at your lymph vessels, which are in green on this picture, lymph vessels are going to run in the same areas that your arteries and veins run. And what happens is when your arteries and veins are exchanging fluid at the capillary beds, some of that fluid leaks out and doesn't make it into the venules to go back to your veins, to go back to your heart. So a little bit of that blood plasma leaks out, but that blood plasma gets picked up by our lymphatic system and through our lymphatic vessels. And what that's going to do is that lymph is going to travel back through our body, and our lymphatic system is kind of like a security checkpoint. It's going to make sure that that lymph or that fluid has all the cells that it needs to and none of the cells that shouldn't be there. So, our lymphatic system it plays alongside our cardiovascular system, but also our immune system, which is a system that allows us the ability to fight and resist diseases and infections. And we'll talk about, we looked at two different types of immunity: specific, which means it only fights one antigen or pathogen, and non-specific, which is going to fight any pathogen or antigen. And just some quick vocabulary: pathogens are any disease causing organisms, where antigens, remember, antigens are just proteins or chemicals that cause an immune response. So antigens are going to be our protein markers on our cells. And all of your cells have antigens. And what those antigens tell your body is, yes, I am supposed to be here, or I'm a foreign substance. You need to get rid of me. So your lymphatic system is made up of four-ish components. You have your lymphocytes, the different cells of your lymphatic system, your T cells, B cells, and natural killer cells. You have your lymph, and your lymph is just a watery fluid. It's interstitial fluid. It contains lymphocytes. It originated as blood plasma. And then you have your lymphatics. Your lymphatics are the vessels that are going to carry the lymph. So like I said before, the lymph vessels run adjacent to your blood vessels. They're different because they're closed at one end. Eventually, they're going to empty into a duct. And those two ducts are called your thoracic and your right lymphatic duct. And what happens is your thoracic duct is going to collect lymph from areas below your diaphragm and on the left side of your body, where your right lymphatic duct only collects lymph from the right side above your diaphragm. And what happens is that lymph that gets collected there is going to be put back into your veins. And so then that blood plasma is getting back into your circulatory system so you have enough blood volume to sustain life. Another component of the lymphatic system is our lymphatic organs. You have your lymph nodes, which are going to be located all throughout your body. They filter the lymph. They're kind of our early detection system. You have your tonsils. Your tonsils are collections of lymph fluid that's found in the back of our throats. And then we have our appendix, which is between our small and large intestine, and our MALT system, our mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, which is found in the lining of our intestine, which we refer to as prior patches. We also have MALT in our respiratory, urinary, and reproductive tracts. We have our pictures of where our lymph nodes are located, where your tonsils are located, and where your appendix and MALT are located. Two other important lymphatic organs are your thymus. Your thymus is going to be located behind your sternum. And why the thymus is important is because it produces our T cells. And our T cells are an important factor in our specific immunity. And then your spleen also plays a large role because it's the largest collection of lymphoid tissue in our body, and it helps remove abnormal blood cells. And it also kind of starts our B and T cell responses in our specific immunity. So there's a lot of pathologies that we looked at with our lymphatic system. Just to point out a few, you have your lymphedema, which is an an obstruction of your lymph vessels, which causes your lymph to collect in your limbs, usually your legs. It's not able to drain, so your legs look very swollen. You have lymphadenopathy, which is disease of the lymph nodes. You have tonsillitis, where your tonsils become inflamed, and appendicitis, where you have inflammation of your appendix. Um, so now we're going to get into our immune system. So we just talked about our lymphatic system and how our lymphatic system is going around checking and making sure that all the cells in our body are supposed to be there. And our immune system is who's going to take care of the cells if they're not supposed to be there. So you have two different types of immunity, or two different types of defenses. You have innate or nonspecific defenses, which will protect against any pathogen or antigen your body comes in contact with. And there's a couple different types of nonspecific defenses. We have our physical barriers like our hair, our sweat, our skin, mucus, and tears. We have phagocytes. Phagocytes are cells that are going to engulf or eat pathogens. And when they do that, they're going to release chemicals to signal other cells of the immune system to activate. We have immune surveillance. Our natural killer cells, or our NK cells, are always circulating through your lymphatic system, and they're going to attack any unusual cells and kill them. We have interferons. Interferons are small proteins that get released by either our phagocytes that have engulfed a pathogen or virus-infected cells. What interferons do is those proteins are going to bind to infected cells and help them release antiviral proteins so the virus can't replicate anymore. And it's also going to increase the activity of more phagocytes and natural killer cells to take care of that pathogen. With interferons, it's important to know the term cytokines. Cytokines are proteins that our cells use in signaling. So your cells will release these proteins and it's going to cause an immune response. Another type of non-specific defense is the complement system. What the complement system does is it's proteins and antibodies working together. And what it does is it's getting rid of pathogens by activating an immune response and enhancing the phagocytic activity. The last two types of nonspecific defenses are inflammation. Inflammation produces redness, swelling, heat and pain, and loss of function in an area of infection. And then we have fever. A fever is going to increase your metabolism, causing more defense cells to be made. And a way to detect a fever in someone is if pyrogens are being released into their body. Pyrogens are proteins that are used to increase our body temperature. So let's say our nonspecific defenses failed. Our next line of defense is going to be our adaptive or specific defenses. Now, specific defenses use three types of lymphocytes. They're going to use T cells, and those T cells are involved in cell-mediated immunity. And there's four different types of T cells. There's cytotoxic T cells, and those cells are able to destroy infected cells. There's helper T cells. Helper T cells are going to help coordinate the specific and non-specific defenses of our immune system. We have regulatory T cells. Regulatory T cells, once the immune response has been achieved, they're going to release chemicals that tell the other immune cells, like, stop, we've achieved our mission, let's be done. And then we have memory T cells that help remember the antigen, so we remember how to fight it off in the future. The second type of cell used in our specific defenses are B cells. B cells are a part of our humoral immunity. And B cells are what help produce antibodies. Another name for antibodies are immunoglobulins. And there are 5 classes of antibodies. You have your IgGs, which are the largest and most diverse. They're the ones that are going to cross the placenta. You have IgE, which are involved in allergies, IgD, which is involved in sensitization, which helps fight off pathogens. You have IgM, which is used in blood typing, and you have IgA, which is found in glandular secretion like tears and sweat. And the third type of cell used in specific defenses are your natural killer cells, which, like I said before, they're always circulating and performing immunological surveillance, checking to make sure that there are no cells in your body that shouldn't be. So the way you acquire or get your specific defenses can be through 2 ways. You can acquire them actively through direct exposure to the antigen. You can naturally acquire them actively through normal exposure. That's just through getting germs and contact. or we can artificially acquire them through vaccines, or we can passively acquire our specific defenses through exposures to antibodies. There's two ways you can be exposed to antibodies. You're either naturally exposed through pregnancy, your mom's going to pass them through her placenta and breast milk, or you can get them artificially through a vaccine. So your specific defenses, they're going to have four characteristics. They're going to be specific. They only work on one pathogen. They're versatile. They can fight off any type of pathogen. They have memory. They remember how to fight that pathogen. And they're also tolerant. They're going to ignore things that are benign or are not going to affect our bodies. So let's talk about how our specific defenses actually work. So T cells are involved in cell-mediated immunity. And what that means is what's going to happen is the phagocytes in our body are going to engulf pathogens. They're going to eat them. And when they engulf that pathogen, they're going to break it down and they put small pieces of that pathogen on the surface of their cell. And those small pieces on the surface of the cell are called antigens. And what it creates is an antigen presenting cell. And that antigen presenting cell is going to be able to activate our T cells. So helper T cells can bind with that antigen presenting cell. And what that binding is going to do is it's going to cause that T cell to go through rapid cell division, and it's going to activate that T cell. And that T cell is now ready to start all other immune responses. So what that T cell is going to do, it's going to release chemicals to signal other immune cells, or it's going to go bind to B cells. We also need to talk about with T cells. So when we're talking about antigen presentation, we also need to be familiar with the major histocompatibility complex. So the major histocompatibility complex is another type of antigen or protein marker on the surface of our cells. All cells have a class 1 major histocompatibility complex, and that's kind of like the cell's check-in. So if it comes in contact with an immune cell, that immune cell is going to attach to that class 1 major histocompatibility complex, and if the cell's doing fine, it'll leave it alone. If the cell is infected, it will cause the cell to go through apoptosis or kill the cell. Then there's class 2 major histocompatibility complexes, and those class 2 major histocompatibility complexes are activated when a cell is an antigen presenting cell. So when a pathogen has been engulfed and a cell is carrying parts of that pathogen, it's a class 2 major histocompatibility complex, which is going to activate an immune response. So our B cells or our plasma cells are a part of humoral immunity. And B cells, they are important because they make antibodies. And some of the antibodies you're born with and some you're going to get through exposure. But antibodies are Y-shaped. And what they do is they are going to help attack the pathogens that are in our body. So B cells, if they come in contact with a pathogen naturally in the blood, they're going to produce some antibodies. But where B cells really kick in is when B cells attach or bind to a helper T cell, it's going to cause that B cell to produce a lot of antibodies. And then those antibodies are going to be able to fight off whatever pathogen is inside our bodies. When B cells are activated by T cells, they're going to also undergo rapid cell division. They're going to produce lots and lots of B cells. They're also going to produce memory cells. And those memory cells are going to be helpful because the second time you get exposed to the same antigen or pathogen, your body is able to respond faster. All right. And so our antibodies are important because they're going to neutralize viral or bacterial toxins. And what antibodies can do is they can attach to many pathogens at once. And so they agglutinate or clump together, which makes it very hard for those pathogens to infect our cells. They activate the complement system, which are proteins and antibodies working together. They're going to cause inflammation. They can also tell phagocytes to opsonize or get rid of those pathogens. Opsonization means to mark the pathogen for destruction, and those phagocytes will come and destroy them. And antibodies can also help prevent bacteria and viruses from attaching to your cells and tissues because they're going to stick to the outside. So those bacteria and viruses cannot bind to your cells and tissues. Then we took a look at the difference between immunocompetence and immunodeficiency. So, immunocompetence is just mean your immune system is working fine, everything's going how it should. Where immunodeficiency means that there is something wrong, your immune system is either compromised or it's not working at all. So, when your immune system is working properly, your cell mediated immunity begins as early as your third month of life, and your antibody mediated immunity is going to be in the fourth month. Um, the antibodies that you get from your mother are going to start to decline pretty early on. And from that, you're going to be able to make your own T cells, B cells, antibodies as you're exposed to different pathogens and antigens. But where we can come into trouble is where we have immunodeficiencies. So chronic stress can depress the immune system, and it can lead to several side effects. Our immune system can also be hypersensitive, which we call allergies. Another disorder of the immune system is an autoimmune disorder. An autoimmune disorder is where your body starts attacking its own tissues. And then you can have immunodeficiency disease, and that can either be caused by your immune system failed to develop normally or it's blocked by immunosuppressive agents. So, if you were to get an organ transplant, you have to take immunosuppressive agents so your body doesn't try to kill off that new organ that you got. But radiation can also act like an immunosuppressive agent. And so that's why people who are undergoing radiation therapy for cancer, they can't be around sick people because their immune system is suppressed. There are also some disorders like severe combined immunodeficiency disease or AIDS that are going to suppress your immune system. All right, so that's what you need to know about your lymphatic and immune system. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy studying.